Okay, should be starting.
All right.
Yep. Good.
All good. Okay, welcome everyone to Brisbane Azure User Group. We've got a fantastic session lined up for you tonight. So we're going to have a bit of a dive through Azure Sentinel. So before that, we'll just quickly go through a couple of the slides. There's a few things that happened that over the last month that I found kind of interesting, and just something to have a look at if it grabs your interest. There's more details in each of the slides. April, but before that, big thank you out to our sponsors. So our sponsors have always been fantastic and are fantastic. So Microsoft and Codify, they absolutely help out with everything that we've been doing in Azure over the last many years. So they're great guys. Check them out. And most importantly, if you want to get involved, now's the time to get involved. So our year is fairly open. So if you've got something to share, it doesn't have to be massive. It can be small. We can put a bunch of people together if you want. But we've got an opening at the moment. So let us know, reach out. We've got an email down there. The slide's going to be published. Just reach out to Dan or myself, and we can get you on the list. So Azure Defender. So there's been a big push in Azure Defender over the last couple of months. Last month I saw we had Azure Defender for App Service. Pretty cool, some really good features on that. And this month, Azure Defender's sort of expanding a little bit more, and we've got Defender for Storage. So it's doing some analysis on the storage and trying to alert you when things are not going great. It's pretty cool. Check it out. There's a bunch of new VMs that have dropped. So pretty cool if you're looking for some pretty awesome compute capabilities. I'm not going to read out all the bits, but basically much bigger, much better, much faster. So pretty awesome with amazing and crazy performance there. So Oracle WebLogic Server on Azure VMs, it's a bit of a not PaaS, but a bit of a packaged solution that'll allow you to run a whole bunch of features with Oracle and WebLogic all packaged up, ready to go. You just type in your stuff and it deploys it onto VMs for you. It allows you to reach out to a whole bunch of Azure services and extend to the Oracle cloud as well. So that's pretty cool. One that piqued my interest was I love what the Azure's doing with its space expansion. So Azure Orbital ground stations are now getting stood up. The first one here, it's just a bit of a peek as to how they're standing up the ground stations for the Azure satellites. And then there's some geospatial data analysis that you can do on the, just one of the services that's coming through from Azure Orbital. This one's a collaboration with one of their partners, and you can see right there some, real practical uses of what's capable. So you can see on the first image, it was empty. Second image, lots of houses have been built. And third image, there's some intelligence analysis to show, well, what's actually happened with the soil and everything during the construction of all these houses. So some pretty cool power that you can see there. There's a bit of extended support for cloud services. Cloud services, very old. You're able now to transition your cloud services into this extended support. There's two different models of doing it. You can redeploy, or you can use a new migration tool. That migration tool is in preview at the moment, but it'll allow you to transition your workloads over there. All All right, so a couple of events. So integration down under. So, due to our affiliation, aka Dan, we definitely plug this every time. So 22nd of April, integration down under. So Dapper, that's looking pretty cool.
Just a word, that may not be on that site yet if you go to that QR code, but it will be within the next day or so. So you can look for the registration for it.
Cool. So everyone who's snapping that QR code doesn't work now, but soon.
It might not.
All right. So we've got our Slack team, YouTube, a bunch of learning assets that recommend, some blogs that are fantastic. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over so that we can talk about Azure Sentinel. We've got Robert Kane here, MCT MVP, degree in electrical engineering, master's in business administration. So he's got lots and lots of certifications. He's going to give you a bit of an introduction into Azure Sentinel and show you how to connect data sources, work with threat analytics, and lots more. So over to you, Robert.
Thanks very much. Let me swap across to my video. Just confirm for me that you can see my screen or screen anymore.
Yep, we can see introduction to Azure Sentinel.
Cool. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Robert Crane. Some information about me in the bottom right-hand corner there. At Director CIA on the Twitters is probably the best place to keep up with the stuff that I'm doing. Now, to kick off things, as with anything these days, we need to work through the alphabet soup of some of the acronyms that are out there, especially in the security space. And the first one we need to get across is the term SIEM. So that stands for Security Information and Event Management. That's largely what Azure Sentinel has been born into existence as a way to manage all this, to aggregate this for your environment. The other one is SOAR, so that's Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response. That is sort of what Sentinel is becoming. So the idea is we monitor all this stuff, that's great. We throw up an alert, but what do we actually do to take care of this? How do we protect our environment in an automated way? So SIEM is the background that Sentinel is built on, and SOAR is basically, I think, the way that it's sort of trending. So this is obviously an Azure server. It is built on Azure services. I'll give you a demo, obviously, but a quick run through here is that one of the challenges has always been around, firstly, aggregating events from multiple locations, be that on-prem, cloud now, but also managing that data, storing that data, because if we have an incident, we may have to go back months, weeks or whatever to investigate it. We need to have somewhere to keep that information, and that potentially could be, gigabytes and gigabytes and potentially terabytes of data that we need to aggregate. So we need an elastic service that can give us that capability, and that's, again, something that Azure is really good at, being that it's built on, storage accounts and all that sort of stuff as well. Now, the other side of the coin now is the automation, as I mentioned. So we want the capabilities, we want all the options to automate. We don't want to just have to necessarily write something in Python, or we don't want to have to necessarily be locked into one language. Again, because we've got a common base on Azure, it gives us a lot of flexibility in that space. So as a starting point is that Azure Sentinel, again, as you notice, there is a cloud-native SIEM and SOAR, as they call it. And basically, the idea is it takes the events and it will then do some automation around that. And we can integrate that with a range of options. And typically, which we'll start out talking about, are those from, again, Microsoft 365 and Office 365, which you get for free. And the big benefit, I think, the big differentiation is going to be the capability to leverage Microsoft's AI, all the data modeling, to give you an indication of if there are threats in your environment. So when we go and have a look at Azure Sentinel, we basically have a dashboard that looks, something like this. I'll show you in more detail a live example. But in essence, this is a great place to start. It gives us this overview concept of is there anything in this environment that we need to worry about? So again, standard Azure style console, dashboard, menus on the left-hand side. We get alerts on the right-hand side there, incidents that we can go and look at. We have the data ingestion models, all of this sort of stuff we'll have a look in great detail. But again, this starts off as a very, very visual tool to give us an overview. So the number one benefit I found of Azure Sentinel is its capability for me to be the first thing that I look at in the morning to evaluate my security posture across all my environments. So I've got logs from Microsoft 365, Exchange Online, SharePoint, my workstations, and any other boxes that I've got floating around the place are all feeding into this. So I can look at this and know whether there's something I need to go and investigate, because it's sucking in signals from, again, so many different locations. Now, the idea is mentioned is that we collect the events, we collect the signals from Microsoft services, typically Azure AD, Exchange Online, but we can pull it from AWS, we can pull it from Google Compute, and we can also suck it in from third-party security devices, firewalls, and we can also use generic logging as well if we want to. So basically, we can ingest data or collect data from just about any source, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. Now, all of this effectively goes into Log Analytics Workspace. Again, they have different names for it in the modern parlance, but again, it's effectively a big database, data lake on which this information, the events, are then accumulated, and we can now run queries across that data to determine if there's anything that we need to worry about. Now, again, we're going to get this enhancement of being able to work out geolocation, IP reputation. We're going to be able to leverage Microsoft's knowledge around its global network to pull those sort of details in. And then we're going to be able to leverage the machine learning. We're going to be able to leverage the ability like Power BI to create notebooks, to give us outputs, to give us reports. And where the SOAR part comes into it, the orchestration comes into it, we have this capability, this inbuilt capability to work with playbooks. So again, playbooks are effectively, either the ability to shell out to PowerShell, Azure Functions, to do logic apps or whatever. So having that capability to not only collect the logs, analyze the logs, but then also act on the logs, I think is extremely powerful in an environment like Azure that we can always, we're very, very familiar with. And we can also integrate with third-party tools. So again, we can send tickets to different, a bit background noise there. We can send tickets, for example, to our ticketing system. We can integrate with other tools. Again, we can take actions. So again, lots and lots of benefits provided by this environment. So in a nutshell here, the good thing about anything Azure is generally you only pay for what you use. So you only pay on the amount of data you analyze. You only pay for the amount of data that you ingest. You only pay for the amount of data that you store, which gives you, again, a great way to begin to scale up. I'll show you the costs and what it's actually costing and give you some ideas, but it is cheap for what it does. Now, again, the idea here is we can start off simply and include free collection services to get the ball rolling. And then as we get familiar with it, we can add more and more services, and that gives us the ability to scale up the cost as we need it. And again, it's a monthly billing rate, and we can always keep tabs on that quite easily, which I think is a really big advantage here. So,
okay, sorry, Miss, I've just.
There we go. I think that one of the big benefits of using, a Microsoft SIEM tool versus a third-party tool is going to be that we're going to get free ingestion for a lot of common logs. So Office 365 audit logs, security alerts, those sort of things are going to come in free into Sentinel, and we also get a free amount of storage as well. So I'll cover that in the costs when I speak about that. But the main benefit here is it's scalable. I don't have to buy a UTM. I don't have to buy an annual subscription. Again, like all Azure, it's just a monthly cost. Okay, so the idea here is that a benefit is that it's pre-wired into a lot of the Microsoft capabilities. So if you're using Cloud App Security, Microsoft Cloud App Security, if you're using Defender for Endpoints, if you're using Azure Defender, all of this stuff is going to integrate seamlessly into Sentinel. Not a lot of work you can need to do. I'll show you again how simple it is. Basically a couple of button presses and it's set up to go. If you want to integrate third-party apps, there may be a little work to get the logs in the right format. Okay, but again, it's relatively easy compared to other solutions that I've seen out there. So the heart of it is that the first step is we want to start with collecting the data. So as you can see here, there are a number of data connectors. So the idea is we go into Sentinel and we start off with our data collectors. So rather than talking about PowerPoint all day, how about I show you real world? So again, if I'm in my Azure portal here, again, all I've got to do is do a search for Azure Sentinel and it will pop right up. You'll see here that it is built on obviously a standard resource group. You need to specify the location for the data and think of this again effectively as a log analytics workspace. Now, when we open it up, what we get here is a dashboard view. Okay, so you'll see our menu down the left-hand side as mentioned. I get my information bar across here, the amount of events that I've ingested, any alerts, any incidents. You'll see that I get an idea of my ingestion over time. So again, there's a demo tenant. That is broken down for me into different types of data. Okay, and over here you'll see that I have incidents that I need to go and address. But before we do that, let's go down and have a look at data connectors down here. So this is how the data gets into the workspace for analysis. So we have 98 connectors available to us. All right, so if we scroll through here, you'll see a range of third-party and Microsoft ones. So here's a Azure Active Directory, for example. We keep going, Azure Firewall, IoT, Azure Defender. But you'll notice you get Barracuda. You get a lot of these built in. So you go in and basically connect up the ones that you have that are capable, that make sense in your environment. Again, you can start with something relatively simple, like a few of these, and then basically build out from there. So let me just pick Office 365 for you. Let me minimize this so that we get a bit more screen space. So over here on this connector, I'll get a bit of a summary here. The last time data was ingested was 10 minutes ago. You'll see that there are 6 workbooks. We'll come to workbooks. Think of workbooks like a dashboard. Queries, again, that's a query across the data, and we get an idea of the amount of data that has been received. Okay, so we get a nice summary. And importantly, we also see the data type. So Office 365 connector will basically bring in data from SharePoint, Exchange, and Microsoft Teams. And again, if we go into the connector page here, you will see that typically for a Microsoft connector, it's a piece of cake. All I do is basically go in and say, yep, I want all these 3, and then I simply push the button and it will then save that data, that configuration for me, and I'm good to go. So the starting point is to work through all of the connectors here that make sense. You can see in general, I've got 8, which in this case are the Microsoft connectors, but you can certainly add your own. So if I pick, for example, this Sophos one, just to give you an example, you'll see here that the data type required is this. So if I open the connector, you'll see that I'll need to go in and complete the steps that are recommended here to get the data from, that third-party option into my environment. But you'll see, like I said, plenty of options in there, VMware, Windows Firewall, Zscaler, all of that stuff is in there. Now, once we've added our data connectors, the next thing we need to think about is we have our data flowing into our big data lake, our big database. The next question then is, okay, we need to analyze this stuff. We need to run some sort of query across all that data to look for any sort of vulnerabilities. Now we do that down there in analytics on the right. So under data connectors, we have analytics. You'll see that currently I have 104 rules active. Now, if I go to the template side, again, I'll just minimize this. Luckily for us, Microsoft provides us with about 280 rule templates that we can select from. So you'll see the ones that are in use here. I can select any of these and add them. So for example, I could select this one and I could create a rule. When we have a look at it, you'll see that basically, and we'll look at this in more detail, this is basically a KQL or a database query that will return basically a result for us. So let's have a look at this one, for example. All right, so this is what it's looking for. And if I go in and, for example, create a rule, I need now to just bounce through a wizard. So what's the name of the analytics rule? I can obviously customize this to suit my needs, the tactics it uses, the severity, and then what is the logics? The logic typically is a KQL query. You could run this manually, but this process is going to do it for you automatically. All right, so we go up and have these different settings. Again, you'll see here we can target local machines, IP addresses, all sorts of things there. And then now is the incident settings. So again, do we want to group these sort of, so if we see an incident which may be a group of alerts, rather than getting bombarded with 50 alerts, maybe we can aggregate those into a single incident that we can view, again, preventing information overload. So that's the concept behind this. Then we can go in here and select an automated response. I'll come to the way to set this up, but again, the playbook is basically, think of Azure Logic Apps, Flow, those sort of things. You'll see here we can go in and select which playbook that we have to take an action. So this is the SOAR, this is the automation component of it as well, that again is currently being enhanced. And finally, we review and we create it, and then we will be able to have that listed. And what that means is that this query will run on a scheduled time basis across the data and ingest the data. So once we have analyzed our data that we have ingested here, then what we're going to see is it's going to then start showing up in our overview. So we've got data flowing in. We've got our analytics running over the top of it to tell us, is there anything we need to worry about and create any incidents. So in this case, you can see that I do have an incident. It's rated as high. Let me go in and have a look at it. So again, we'll see here that it is currently, unassigned. So if I want, I can go in and assign it to, a user. I can go in and determine the status. Is it active? So let's leave it as active for the time being. So it means that someone's looking at it. You'll see here that I get a nice summary of what's going on here. I get a timeline. If I click on this, you'll see that I get, again, a summary of the information here. I can look at the alerts that this generated. Remember, an incident could involve multiple alerts. I can, set up bookmarks. I can look at the entities. This is the one I find really handy. So it can tell me which email address or account is the one that caused this, which IP address, and it was generated from Microsoft Teams. And if I want, I can add my own comments for anything else. Now, once I've done that, I can go to the investigate key, and this is where it gets really cool. So now I get an investigation graph. So I can, zoom into here, and I can go off and say, okay, well, tell me more information or what you know about this IP address. Tell me more information about, this user. Okay, I get the tenant ID, I get the user ID, I get all that sort of fun stuff. And you'll see, let me just zoom out a little bit. You'll see here that I've also got a fly out menu here that I can look at related alerts and again, more information there. So again, a really nice graphical representation and allow you to drill in through an incident. Remember, an incident can be, again, multiple results. Now, once I've finished with this, normally what I do is I just go here and I go in and say close, and I say, look, I know it's benign. I know what's going on there. That's good. So I close off that incident. And then the idea would be is to work through, again, all of these that are shown to me. So again, the way this has happened is that I've ingested data from the connectors that I've specified. I've then selected the analytics, the queries that run across that data on a regular basis, and that has basically created this analysis here, given me any incidents that I need to go in and investigate. So I will pause there and just see, are there any questions? How are we going to handle that? We're going to wait to the end, or do we want to see if anybody does have any particular questions before we move on?
I don't think there are any questions yet.
Oh dear. Are there people out there? Knock, knock, hello.
Yeah, there are people.
No, just kidding, just kidding. All right, so again, once we've got that, we now have some really powerful capabilities. Now, the thing that I like to show people is let's go to active hunting. So these analytics that I showed you down the bottom, these run at a scheduled time. So they're going to run once an hour, once every 3 hours, once a day, whatever, right? But what I can do is I can go into active mode, and this is where I'm going to try and hunt down the perpetrators or look at my data right here and right now. So what we'll see here is that at the moment, I've got in my active capabilities, again, 199 total queries. So there's 199 queries that I could run across my data. So if I wanted to select the one for multiple password resets, basically by a user, I would set that, click that, I would run the query. Okay, so it's now going to go off and run that query and say, look, no users in this time period have done a password reset. Happy with that, right? So again, I can go in and view the results. But what's infinitely more powerful is of these 199 queries, now I can go up to this button here and basically run everything. So if I push that button, you'll see here that it's now loading the results. It's running every single one of those 199 queries across all the data that it currently has, and it's going to come back and tell me right here, right now, any of the results that I need to potentially go in and investigate. So to me, you have the capability to do regular queries and check your data using that. But if you want to go active, if you want to look at that right here, right now, you can actually basically run every single query that you create or is provided by Microsoft across your data and then start investigating the results and go from there. Now, of course, all of this looks really good and it is all in text, which really doesn't ring bells for people who write the checks. So what we want to be able to do is show graphical results here and make it easier. So thanks to Microsoft's usage and obviously development of something like Power BI, we basically get a Power BI style dashboard for each one of our connectors, right? So let me just go in and find the Office 365 one. So these are called workbooks. So if we look at a workbook here, it's going to take the data from our Office activity. And what I'm going to do is view the workbook here. You will see that the workbook basically looks like a Power BI dashboard. All right, so again, this is very similar to the standard sort of Azure dashboardy concept here. And we can go in and use this dashboard. We can go in and say, what about we just have a look at maybe Microsoft Teams. And again, that will update our graph live. Okay, and we can vary the last, let's go in and have a look at, the last 7 days maybe and get, all that sort of information. Now, of course, we can go in here and we can edit this. So really, in essence, all this is graphical representations of queries. So if we go in and edit this one, for example, you'll see here that is effectively the query that it is running, and it is basically just displaying that as a graphical output. So once you've sort of mastered the query language, you can certainly go and create these workbooks and edit them and so on. And if you want, again, we can also go in and look at the advanced editor, get down and dirty with the JSON side of it. Now, I'll come back to why that's a really handy thing to do. But if you want to, you can, again, not use the GUI directly, and you can basically get in, like I said, with the JSON there. So obviously we can create multiple reports, multiple workbooks. We can have ones for different periods. You can have a base template and then create custom ones based on that. You can create your own and so on. So there's a lot of flexibility here. So think again of workbooks as Power BI dashboards. And again, Microsoft gives you a number of standard ones, typically one for each connector out of the box. And you'll see if we go up the top here that it has updated, these ones. So again, these ones are currently letting me know it's been updated. So to update them, I just select this and then I just go update, and this is going to update that workbook for me, thanks to Microsoft, and bring in all the latest data around that. So really, again, if we want to look at graphical representations of our information, of our events, the workbooks basically is the place to go through that. All right, so there's a question there from Luke. Is it possible to get a connector to a TXT file on a VM? Not quite sure. The idea would be is we need to be sucking it from the logs. So again, the VM, if it's a Windows VM, would be feeding its event or its security logs directly into the Azure Sentinel. I'm not quite sure what you mean by a TXT connector. So again, think of the events going straight from the Windows machine to Azure Sentinel and then running through the queries and running through the workbooks to give you the output. All right, so again, not quite sure what you mean by the text output there. So we can also go in and we can also look at particular entity behaviors, right? So when this started out back in the good old days, what it was very, very technical. So you had to sort of be familiar with KQL, you had to be familiar with a lot of the standard Azure stuff. But over time, what we've seen is this has morphed into becoming a more click GUI friendly or simplified interface here. So one of the examples here, again, is this entity analysis. So here's my identity, an individual user. It's pulling that from the Microsoft 365 environment. But now I'm getting like a summary. So I'm seeing that, you know, this user has this many alerts over a period of time. Here's a bit of a time list of the incidents that are related, again, to a user. And again, we've got our insights in here. So it's going to tell us that, you know, these things aren't done, these things need to be done, this is what it's related, action types, anomalous operations, all that sort of thing based on an entity there. So that entity typically is going to be a user. So Luke says that we just have our logs at the moment in text files on a VM. Okay, so if you have the logs somewhere, then you need to get them into the workspace. And again, that's generally if you set up something like CEF, so what is it, CEF, I think, you can set up a relay style workstation to do that. I would suggest that you're better off feeding the logs directly into Azure Sentinel if you can, but there are plenty of methods that you can use as a way station to get the data into Azure Sentinel, but remember, it has to be in the appropriate format. So at the end of the day, if you're looking to get those log files in, again, just look through the list of connectors here, and I'll give you another option shortly as to what to have a look at. So if we go in here, I think it's CEF, is it? Or whatever they call it. Yeah, so a common event format arrangement could be set up. All right, so if you want to go and configure that and then, you know, send the logs through that or the files that you have through that, that certainly, again, would be possible. Now, once we've got all this analysis, that's really fantastic, but let's go and look and think about doing some automation. So the idea is that we go in here and we create basically automation rules. All right, so if we go in here, you'll see that we can add a new rule or we can add a playbook. So a playbook's going to be a number of different actions that are taken. So effectively, as you can see up the top here, I'm now going to go in and create a logic app. So what that means is that effectively playbooks are logic apps. If you're not familiar with logic apps, they're a bit like Power Automate in Microsoft 365. They're a bit like if this then that. Very simple way to create and manage, you know, these sort of responses here. And again, if you are looking for the next level, then you can obviously chain or integrate the logic apps with things like Azure Functions, PowerShell, and so on. All right, so lots and lots of options in there that you can go and set up. If we have a look at the playbooks, so you'll see that I have 3 in here. So let's have a look at the email alert. So again, a very simple thing here is it's basically going to take the, let's have a look here. It's going to take any alert and it's going to basically send it to a email address here to let me know that an event has fired in Azure Sentinel. Okay, so again, think of this like logic apps, exactly what it is. And again, it's as simple and easy to set up and manage and program and do your automations around this using that sort of concept. So I like logic apps, and it gives you that functionality to go to code view and also to jump across and have a look at the designer view there if you're not so much a coding style person. So lots and lots of options. So one here that was common was the ability to go and get third-party data from Microsoft 365. So you'll see here that this is running on a regular basis to suck data in a particular format and then present it to Azure Sentinel. And again, just simple logic app design here on doing that. So again, maybe if you're looking to suck your text files in, you could create something around this to do the same sort of thing. So again, all of that's certainly possible, and that's around the automation. So again, we suck data in via the connectors, we analyze it with the analytics on a scheduled basis. We can analyze the data ad hoc using the hunting. We can present it in a user or on a dashboard style interface using our workbooks, right? So again, think Power BI dashboards, and then we can look at providing automation to take action or to import or to, again, do something that we need to do on a regular basis. Now, if we go right down the bottom here under settings, you'll see we are now in the pricing scheme. Now, the pricing scheme is largely based on, again, log analytics here, the cost of the data you're ingesting per day, but notice the tier down here is you've got to pay as you go. So you're only paying per gigabyte, right? So I'll come back and we'll do a drill down on prices, but the first cost is always going to be an ingestion, or is always going to be an ingestion cost, all right? And the next one is going to be the storage of that ingested data, and the third cost is going to be the analysis of that data. So here's the storage costs, and again, I've got it set up to be pay as you go. You can see on the right-hand side, I've got an idea of how much is being ingested per day. Small amount of data because this is just pulling in Microsoft and Azure information. All right, so pretty straightforward, not a lot of data. Most of it is log management. So if I go into settings here, you'll see that, again, we get some more information here, but workspace settings will take us to the log analytics underlying the Azure Sentinel analysis. So this is where the data lives. This is where the data tables are. And obviously, if you go down in here and have a look at the estimated usage cost, we get an idea of what this is going to cost us and what's being ingested. So again, over the last 31 days, we're getting this amount of data. And again, you can see that we have the capability to integrate with a free trial. We also have ability to limit the amount of data that's brought in to keep our costs down if you want. And we also have an option here to control how long our data is retained for. Now, generally, log analytics will give you the standard 7 days and there's no additional cost normally. The good thing about Azure Sentinel is it will actually give you up to 90 days of retained data included as part of the cost of doing that. Now, if we go out and have a look at the pricing, because everybody wants to know what the price check is on R4, and again, you'll find that in the official site here. So let's have a look here, pricing table, let's hope. So basically, if we have a look here, if you look at the pay-as-you-go, so the pay-as-you-go is going to charge you basically $3.40. Yes, I have Australian dollars. Let me just change this to, where are we? Did I go past it? There we go. Let's say Australia East. And that's going to charge you $4, roughly $4 per gigabyte of ingested data to analyze. Okay, so this is effectively an analysis cost. So it's $4 per gig. And you saw that I was only bringing in a couple of 100 megabytes, so I'm well under that. Now, if you have a look here, you'll see that the next question is around data retention. So the data retention costs are basically per gigabyte data ingested. And again, note here, there is no charge for the first 90 days. So Azure Sentinel is going to give you no cost of that data ingested into the workspace retained for the first 90 days, okay? So we're going to get free storage of this data for 90 days. Now, we then need to look at, again, the actual ingestion cost because there is a cost to bring things, into Azure, all right? And if we go down the bottom here and you have a look at this here and it says, okay, what data can be ingested at no cost to Azure Sentinel? So Azure activity logs, audit logs from Office 365, SharePoint Exchange, alerts from Defender products, Azure Defender, Microsoft Defender, blah, blah, blah. Identity, Azure Security Center, Cloud App Security, information protection, all right, and monitor logs as well. The only cost you would have is for audit data. Okay, so that's currently not free. So if you start off with connecting all of these free services, which is my recommendation, there's not going to be any cost for ingestion. There's effectively not going to be any cost for storage because you're keeping it for 90 days and then purging it. And the only cost you're going to be up for is going to be the cost of analysis, which we saw is about $4 a gig. So if I go in here and go to my cost billing, all right, so actually let's go back here. So let's just go back to Sentinel for a quick sec and just show you. So I'm basically sucking in on average, right, when this comes up. So I'm sucking in this example, let's say 20,000 logs a day, in 24 hours. And let's see, pull it in 30 days. There we go. So I'm pulling in, oh, that's events. Okay. So, oh, there we go. So I'm pulling in, let's call it, I don't know, 120,000 logs from things like Office 365 and that over the last 30 days. All right. So let me go in and have a look at the cost of that. So if we go in here and select my subscription, go into cost analysis, go into the option when it displays to look at the individual items. Okay, so again, if we go in here and look at cost by resource, and we change this to say the last month. No, actually, let's change the last invoice. It's fine. And let it hopefully refresh. Talk amongst yourselves. Come on, Azure. Be nice to. There we go. And if we drill into this again, let me get rid of this. Can I escape? Like get rid of it? No. So I've got to select this again, maybe. There we go. So if I drill into this and find my workspace, let's have a look. See if I can remember what the name is without going back. Might be this one, I think. There we go. It might be a bit hard to see, but again, if you have a look at this, you'll notice that the analytics cost, the analysis of all that data cost me a grand total of 48 cents for that last month. Right, so to me, 48 cents to give me the assurity that when I go in and have a look, I get this overview of what I need to worry about. I get all my events from all my services basically feeding into this. I get incidents that I need to go and drill in over here. I have all the connectors feeding into this. It's chump change. For what it does, it's chump change. Now, as a comparison for you, let me bring up my production one. So again, in this case, this Sentinel, again, is bringing in production data. You'll see here that it's bringing in a hell of a lot more logs because those logs are being brought in from workstation servers that are on-prem. There's about 10 or 12 of those. So I'm bringing in all the analytics from my workstations. You can see the majority of them are security events. And if I go into here, go into my cost center, and again, this will vary depending on the services and the amount of machines and all that sort of stuff. Look at cost management and basically repeat the same process. Okay, so let's go into cost analysis. Okay, it doesn't want to play ball, so maybe I have to go to, where is my subscriptions here? Azure subscriptions, let me go into this one. And now let me go into cost analysis and let it come up. Maybe it's not cost by resource. And if I look at the pricing, what I roughly find is basically if I divide it out by the workstation, typically what I'm going to find is that it's going to cost me about $5 a machine to ingest all that information. So let's go to last invoice. Let's go to cost by resource. And then drill in, look at the workspace, and then basically divide it by the number of machines. So here's my log analytics workspace. So you see last month, right? So last month it cost me a grand total of $25 for Sentinel to do the analysis. So that's the analysis per gigabyte. And here's basically a storage cost the ingestion cost, beg your pardon, ingestion cost for that data for information. So again, what's the total there? 30, 42, 40, let's say $45 for all that basic analysis. If I go in here and have a look at Azure Sentinel, and again go down to the settings and go into the workspace settings here, and actually, was that what I wanted? Yeah, and go into the cost analysis here. You'll see that basically I'm ingesting 44 gigs, 45 gigs a month. So for $45 a month for 45 gigs of data, okay, so it's not a lot of money. Again, not a lot of money for what it does. It's extremely cost effective, I think, in my opinion. So again, there's a no-brainer, but start off with the free services and then scale up. Now, the last thing that I will talk about, which is a really big benefit, I would suggest, is this community button. So in the world today, it's all about building a community and leveraging others to go in and write the code, to create workbooks, to do the playbooks. Again, somebody else has done the hard work from you. So if we go to the Azure Sentinel community here, basically a GitHub repo, and in here you will see here are the data connectors, custom data connectors you can import. Here are hunting queries you can import. Here are the playbooks. So let's go in and have a look at some of the old playbooks. So you'll see here there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and many more lots and lots of workbooks that the community has put together. So the idea here is that not only do you get a great out-of-the-box solution, not only do you get a great number of default connectors, templates, analysis rules, that's only the beginning. You can go in and extend that even further using things that the community have created and building around this product. You can also work with Sentinel using PowerShell. So there is a PowerShell module that you can use to manipulate and work with this in an automated way as well. So again, in essence, if you do have an Azure environment, if you do have a Microsoft 365 environment, my advice to you would be is that you should set up Sentinel. The costs are marginal, and start off with the free services that Microsoft provides you out of the box. Get a feel for it, and then start adding the additional data, feeds as required. But having the machine learning, the bots doing all the work for me, so that I can basically come in and review a single pane of glass here is a huge benefit. So again, we talked about the analytics rules, lots in there. And again, just a quick design option if you do have multi-tenanted. So you can, again, have the workspace, multiple workspaces in one tenant. You can also use things like Azure Lighthouse to allow you access to multi-tenants if you want. So it will support the multi-tenant. That's probably the preferred option, is to use Lighthouse rather than do it all inside one tenant. But it is possible to do that if that's the way that you want to do it. And again, the idea here, as I mentioned, is lots of ways for data to come in, bringing it in through Ceph, agents, all sorts of ways to bring the data in here. I'll make sure the slides are available to you after the fact. And again, the Ceph architecture in essence is you put in a relay which will capture the logs and then shoots it up to Azure Sentinel, and it can be done securely, again, through a firewall. So as I mentioned, the quick wins are Office 365, Azure Activity, and first-party alerts, Cloud App Security, Azure ID information protection. And then if you've got AWS, you can do that. There would be a cost there to do that. And again, if you've got agents, you can then go and put those on those things and feed those again into the environment. We talked about the free services. That's what I'd recommend here. And after that, then you can start using the Ceph collection for anything that's more complex than you would normally see out there. So a list of resources here that you can take advantage of. There's plenty of videos. There's plenty of training out there. I would point you to obviously the quick start, which is fantastic. The tutorial about investigating incidents. This becoming an Azure Sentinel Ninja is a whole range of resources Microsoft's put together in one single blog post. And again, there's also a Microsoft Learn there as well. So some resources from me as I wind up. Again, I do write a regular blog at that location. Do have a GitHub repository for all sorts of PowerShell, particularly around Microsoft 365, but there is some Azure stuff there. A newsletter, tutorials, a place where I stick all the slide decks, and that's where this will go, and a regular podcast and some online training as well. If you do want to contact me after the fact, please feel free to do so. Email's fine, director@ciaops.com, or on the Twitters @directorcia is also a great place to go. So with that, I am at the end of all my slides, and I would assume we're still on time, and I would see if there are any questions from the audience.
Well, you got a compliment about your podcast from Andrew.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. What I like to hear.
There was a further comment by Luke about where they have their logs at the moment.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay.
So a Ceph connector is probably the best unless you can get tricky with Power Automate. So it can be done. It's just a matter of formatting the data and then using some vehicle to transport it in there. Lots of options. Again, move it into, somehow get it into an Azure storage account or an Azure blob and then suck it in across from there, or a table or whatever. I'm pretty sure it'd be pretty straightforward. So again, a little bit of work. And again, I would suggest that look at the community stuff first. Go to the GitHub repo in the Azure community. Would be pretty certain that someone else has already come up with something to do exactly what you need to do, because you won't be the first one that does things that way. Appreciate the feedback, Peter. Nothing else. Stunned silence. Oh dear. What is it? We got 6 minutes to kill, have we?
We do. We got.
Do I need to tap dance? I can do more. I can keep going. Get me on a roll. So the last thing, since there aren't too many questions, is to look at logs. Hopefully some people are familiar with the Kusto query language. But basically what I do is, again, I don't reinvent the wheel. I just find somebody else who's done something before me. And again, one of the ones that I found recently that I thought was really interesting was, let me find the one that I want. Oh yeah, this one here. So this query here, which I'll need to run on my production environment over here. So let me go back to Sentinel. Let me go back to the, where are we? The logs. Okay, so again, run that and minimize that. So this one here that I found basically allows you to report on uptime of your devices. So again, because all my devices are reporting into Sentinel, all the data's in here to allow me to go in and query their uptime. So hopefully in a second, it'll come back and it'll show me the uptime that my devices have had, over the, I think it's the last month there. And then if I want, I can go, you know what, I want to make it a chart. And then once I make it a chart, then I could then throw it into, a workbook or whatever from there. So again, I think that there's lots and lots of Kusto queries out there that you can use. Again, leverage the community, leverage those capabilities. Don't reinvent the wheel. But once you've got all your data sort of flowing into, this environment, there's really a lot you can do with it, not only security-wise, but also, again, management-wise. So, again, don't overlook the logs. And I assume, again, you may have had someone talk about, the wonders of log analytics and the Kusto query language. All right, so
question from Ash.
David's implemented Sentinel tomorrow. Oh, that was good timing, wasn't it? There you go. You're an expert. Thank you, Ashok. Peter, Queensland Gov are looking to using Lighthouse across the agency. Yep, Lighthouse is the way to go for sure. Does the Office 365 connector connect to the Office 365 activity logs? Absolutely. I would suggest that you really want to connect to the Azure AD sign-in logs. For that, you'll need a tenant with Azure AD P1. So to get the, again, if I go back to my production tenant, which does have that, I'll go back to here. So if we have a look at the connectors, where are we? Down here. And we have a look at, I think it's Azure AD. Let's have a look. No, let's have a look at this one. Okay, so if I have a look at Azure Active Directory, select that, and then we go over here, you'll see that it requires the sign-in logs and the audit logs. So there's your audit logs. The sign-in logs, typically you need an Azure AD P1 for that to be available. Okay, so again, pretty easy to go in and set in. Let's go and have a look here. You'll see that I'm, again, sucking in. So it'll tell me here that I haven't got, appropriate diagnostic settings or read write. Now, the reason that that's coming up is because I'm running PIM, so I'm running Privileged Identity Management, which means at the moment I'm a limited user on this environment. If I graduate myself to an administrator, then I'll be able to get to all these settings, but I've turned those off. But you see, I probably need to go in and enable all these as well, since they've all just gone out in preview. So Azure AD P1 is your friend, and that's going to send more logs, but definitely the audit logs will go in there, ASHOC. So again, set that all up and use those. Any other questions? Nope, I think it seems as though we're good. Seems as though we're on time. 2 minutes, is that enough time for you to round off, guys? Or do I need to keep going?
Well, if there's no more questions, then there's no reason why we can't wrap up.
I'm happy to hang around and answer any questions or whatever, but again, I don't want to keep people from other activities. Bertos, I think, has his hand up. Bertos, let me see here. Do I have the power? Let's look here.
I thought it'd just be easier to explain. When you worked on that incident and you dismissed it as a benign positive,
yep.
Was there a way to automate that response if the same thing come through again?
Yeah, so you'd have to create a playbook to deal with that, and you can. Don't forget that incident is determined by the Custo query that you set up. So what I did is I've got a workstation here or a server NAS thing I've got here, which I RDP into regularly, but only once a day, and that throws up an error or a warning because it's seen as suspect. So I went into the query and I adjusted the query so it now doesn't throw up as often. So you've got plenty of options there. And you can obviously change the query, but you could also automate with the playbooks at the end to take whatever action that you want.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Well, if there are no more questions, then Robert, thank you very much. That was an absolutely awesome presentation. I think the reason there's no questions is because you explained everything so clearly, and it looks like such a phenomenal product. I've learned a few things myself about it, so it's it's great. Thank you for coming in.
So if you have your own tenant, use it for personal uses, absolutely go in and turn this stuff on. It's going to pick up so much because Microsoft's doing all the hard work and queries and testing multiple. It's just like, I cannot tell you from a security point of view, having the machines on your side doing all this checking for you is just going to make your life so much easier.
Excellent. Got one more thing coming in the chat, I think.
You're going to tell me how good the podcast was, no? That's the only comments that are allowed now, isn't it? No.
That's right.
It's a long one.
Apparently.
Long one.
Oh.
There you go. See? Like the podcast. Told you. Thank you, Luke. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks.
Smiley face
so
too.
Much.
Woohoo.
Thanks so much, Robert. That was an awesome presentation. So for everyone who's still logged on, give me a few days, probably closer to the weekend, and the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube site. And sooner than that, we'll put the slides up too, definitely from the Azure News Roundup that Damien did. That'll probably go up tonight or tomorrow. And Robert, if you want to share your slides somewhere, and you can just post a link to where it is in the Meetup site, which I think you have access to. So I usually just put the in the comments there, I'll put the Meetup with the links are.
Yeah, I'll make sure that I take out all the all the bad stuff first. So yeah, I'll make sure those slides are up shortly.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for coming. It was great to see everybody. We do have a session lined up next month, and that is going to be with Rory Braybrook and talking about the Microsoft Identity Jigsaw and putting the pieces together. And as Damien said at the beginning, if anybody is keen to do a presentation, even if it doesn't have to be a full session too, if you want to do a short one, we can fit you in. Just let us know, baug@outlook.com.au, and we'd love to hear from you. So with that, I'll end the recording, and great, thanks everybody for coming. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, guys.